we talked about leadership and personality. I know some quiet leaders and some loud leaders. Loud leaders love to leading teams with some speeches or some emotional driving speech to the teams, but also is quiet leaders who come and does the work on the pitch. It's very important that team recognize these leaders.
Walker and Dunlop brings you insights for life. Unique perspectives from impactful leaders. This is the Walker Webcast with Willy Walker.
Welcome to another Walker Webcast. It is my honor, pleasure, and privilege to have Andriy Shevchenko join me today to talk about soccer, to talk about Ukraine, and to talk about his role as clearly one of the most significant sports figures in Ukrainian history, as well as someone who played a very large role in European soccer, mostly in the decade from 2000 to 2010, and then his role subsequently running both the Ukrainian National Football Team as well as the Ukrainian Football Federation, which he now chairs. Andriy, first of all, welcome, and it's very nice to see you and have you.
Thank you so much. It's great to meet you too, Willy.
Just fantastic, and I'm very thankful of our mutual friend Colin Coleman, who works with me at Walker & Dunlop, for introducing us and making this conversation happen. Let me do a quick bio, Andriy, so that people know who you are. Clearly, football fans around the world, soccer fans around the world know exactly who you are, but many of our listeners here in the United States who might be in the commercial real estate world and might not be the follower of football that many are, might not exactly know how significant a figure you are in the world of football. Andriy Shevchenko is one of the most accomplished figures in Ukrainian sports history, a former striker for Dynamo Kiev, AC Milan, and Chelsea. He won the 2004 Ballon d'Or and remains Ukraine's all-time leading international goal scorer. Following his playing career, he became head coach of the Ukrainian National Team, later serving as a humanitarian ambassador for Ukraine, and in 2024 was elected president of the Ukrainian Association of Football, the UAF. Widely regarded as one of the greatest strikers of his generation, Shevchenko scored more than 300 career goals and became an icon at AC Milan, where he won the UEFA Champions League Series A title and numerous individual honors. He is a member of the AC Milan Hall of Fame and author of My Life, My Football. Andriy, let's start with the World Cup 2026, because you and I just both watched the number one seed France fall to Spain. Doing this call very late at night over in Europe after watching the game. First of all, thank you for staying up so late. But the Lion of France falls to Spain. What was your take on the game this evening?
Willy, first of all, thank you so much for a nice introduction, and I feel very proud about my career and about game tonight. I think the Spain plays some unbelievable football. And obviously the France is very strong individual players, but in a way how Spain played like team today, it's incredible against such a strong opponent like France. And then obviously I expect something more from the France, better reaction after first half, but didn't come very well, and something was missing during the game. And I think we have to give the credit to the Spanish team, and the coach, he prepared the game very well against France, and the spirit inside of the team, it started from the first minute, and in the end of the match, I saw that how much they was preparing and ready for the game. And then apart, they have such a strong individual players also, but they play incredible game today, like team.
And did you think that kick that turned into the first penalty shot that turned in the first Spain goal was actually a foul that was worthy of the penalty shot?
Definitely, yeah, because it's a clear touch. I think this moment is happened during the games when defender lost a little bit moment. He lose the orientation, and then he didn't see where is exactly striker behind him, and then decide to clear the ball with the kick, and it was a good anticipation from the striker, and then for me is 100% penalty. I think it's a good decision from the referee.
Yeah. And at the end of the game, when France had the free kick from just outside of the zone with, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes left, so it was sort of a must goal to potentially get to being able to score another one to tie it. Mbappe, his shot went sailing over the top of the crossbar. And as I looked at that shot, I thought the equivalent to my uneducated view was that was like having a putt at the end of the Masters that you leave short. In other words, because he sailed it over the crossbar, there was no ability to either force the goalie to make a save or get a rebound off of a potential save. And that if you're going to do that kind of a shot, you must keep it down. Even if the goalie saves it outright, you at least have a chance for a second shot. Is that a fair way of looking at that? Or is that unfair because there are people in front of him and he's got to lift the ball at such, I mean, you've done this shot 1,000 times. So the question there is it too much to say he should have kept it, if you will, in play, like a putt going back past the hole? Or was the way he shot it, he has to go to try and make it in the corner and it might fly high by a foot?
You actually right, because I think football depends from all the sport depends from momentum. Okay, and then this is the last chance for the France team to come back, maybe try to come back, and then I think in that point, in my point, I will always try to make the target, because if you put the ball in the target, anything could happen. The goalkeeper can make mistakes, some reflection it could be, but I don't think is the night of the France. Since the first minute started, Spain was always ahead with any component in the game. They better play like team. I think for sure they won more individual battles. They control ball better. They have a midfielder position today way better than France. They played between the line much better. And I think Spain today deserves to win in the way how they play. Of course, during the matches, France have a chance to come back. And this is one of the chances, because we know that individual players make the huge difference during the games. And Mbappé is a world-class player, is a leader of the team, is a captain, and but I think is not his time. I think the moment is been lost during the game.
And when you talk about momentum, let's rewind the clock for a moment, and we'll kind of, if it's okay with you, we'll go kind of back and forth between this
Of
year's
course.
World Cup and some of your memories from when you played. But in the Champions League final in 2005, AC Milan was up against Liverpool 3-0 after the first half. And then in the second half, the momentum changed significantly, as you just said. And I've heard you talk about going back and watching the tapes of that game over and over and over again, almost to punish yourself. What you played enough. Everyone kind of wants to know, what's that moment? What's that spark? What makes it so the momentum changes? Because if you could identify it, everyone would do it. No? And so we all sit there and say, what's that moment where it starts to go? Is there anything in that second half against Liverpool that something happened that allowed them to turn the momentum in the game? Or was it just sort of a cumulative effect that played out for the second half to allow them to tie it and then take it to penalty kicks afterwards?
I think it's exactly what happened in that game. It was a 6 minutes, whereas we lost a little bit control of the game. And I think the big part of this during that game, they played the fans, because Liverpool fans, even was a team was 3-0 down, it still believe. They was cheering, they was encourage the team, they support team. And I think in that moment, you know the famous phrase, and you never walk alone in Anfield. It's something what really help the players to believe that they will come back and somehow. And then I think that we lost control of the game for 6 minutes, and then Liverpool come back from 3-0 down to 3-3, and then it's another game started from there. And then again, momentum we was talking about. AC Milan in that after create so many chances that we could score again 2-3 goal and then finish the game winning. But this momentum, it clearly showed that wherever we've been trying, it's something click. It's quite difficult to explain it. But I remember in the last second, I have clear chance to score the goal. And then it was a double save from the Dudek. And then, of course, after the game, even right now, when I see that moment, I could still think what I can do better in that moment. What I will change something.
I find that to be really interesting, Andriy, in the sense that you were the star of the team. You were given the ball for the last kick, and everyone knew that the coach was giving you the 5th shot because you were the best player. And yet I've heard you in other interviews say that you still replay that all the time, that you still wish you'd done better. And I can understand the core feeling of saying, yeah, I mean, I wish I'd done a better job. Yet at the same time, it feels to some degree as if it haunts you, if it's something that you wish you didn't have to remember about. And as someone who is a leader of a company, if we do well, I clearly feel great that we've done well. If we do poorly, I have to take responsibility for us doing poorly. And yet at the same time, that's the responsibility I take as the leader of the company. And I think about you asking for the ball in 2003 when you won the Champions League, and the coach wanted you to shoot second, and you said, no, I want to go 5th. And that's you stepping in and saying, I want the final shot. And you made the final shot and you won the Champions League. And what an incredible, exuberant moment. But I find it interesting that you still think back on the 2005 with this, the word in Spanish is vergüenza, but this feeling of you wish you'd done better. I understand you wish you'd done better, but not to the point of you were given the opportunity. You earned the opportunity.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you in that moment you always think about uh, what its best solution could be for you, because the penalty shooting is quite difficult moment. It's very unusual for the football because free kick or something it's okay, but penalty shoot the ball is firm, is not moving, and then it's it's only you and goalkeeper, and then of course uh, theoretically you have a lot more chances to score that goalkeeper saved that ball, but in reality we actually come in 50-50 chances. Okay, and it's kind of the psychological moment between is goalkeeper and you, or yourself mostly I've said, because uh, when you go to take the penalty, that 50 yards, 70 yards walk from center to the penalty shoot, it's so many thoughts is going on in your head. How I can shoot, or I go right, or go left, or I wait the goalkeeper, you know, and
Do you hear the fans during that period of time, Andriy, or is that all blacked out?
no, it's all black. It's something what we used to dealing with. When you play in a big stage like that, I think fans is not affected you. We are professional. We know our job. It's mostly because we try to bring the memory, from information what we know. Example, if I was a penalty shooter from to AC Milan, and I always ask before the game some tape from goalkeepers, how what he does during the penalty, he's moving, or what move he does to understand better what the decision I have to make it, and look, uh, beauty of this sport, because it's not the numbers, like we talk about the business. Okay, business is practical, it's 90%. Of course, the right decision you have to make. You have to hire right people around you. You have to make company going with a good atmosphere, with some positive energy. But the 90% of your success is in numbers. Okay, football is exists exists numbers also is important, because now is new technology brings a lot of information, but beauty of this sport, because anything could happen in the last second, is emotional. We can control that emotional,
Yeah.
and then I don't know any football players in the world who never miss the penalty.
Yeah, sure. Sure. And on that, one of the things that I heard you say that I thought was very interesting was in the 2003 penalty shot, you had in your mind what you were going to do and you stuck to it. Whereas in the 2005 penalty shot, you had something in your mind and you changed your mind as you went to take the shot.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think about that as it relates to sort of being disciplined about the thought of you looked at the keeper in 2005 and you switched your strategy rather than in 2003, you said, I'm going lower right and the goalie jumps to the left and boom, you win the Champions League.
Yeah, it's true. That was my first Champions League. What I won, I was a clear decision from that, because it's actually that walk what we talk about. Uh, I was all that 50 yards what I walk, and I always repeat one thing: don't change your decision. Don't change your decision. Just clear your mind. You know what you have to do. Very similar situation in 2005. I was going there, I know how I want to kick, but it's something click in my head, because I remember a couple years ago or a year ago, I was missed the penalty. I hit the post, and then just because I opened a little bit too much my right feet, and then in that moment, I was thinking about just make sure you don't open too much, and I actually close, and then ball was going in the middle, and then goalkeeper was moving right. They have a chance to stop his feet, and then just save that penalty. I mean, is always, it depends from we all different, different. In my mind, I need to information. I like work with information. I was more information coming in my head. I like to imagination. I like to figure it out. What is the best for me in that moment? What I should do it. I kind of go through every time. To my games. I was like to game finish, come back to my home, just take the tapes, sit, and then look how team plays, what I can do better for the team in my movement, what I can do better in my movement individual, what strengths I should work to get better. It's kind of stuff what I was love to do it.
And you've played in all the great stadiums of the world. You mentioned a moment ago that the Liverpool fans that day in the Champions League final were a huge part of Liverpool coming back. What's the memory you have of walking into a stadium, either your own, playing at AC Milan or Chelsea or in Kiev, or playing in an opposing stadium, where all of a sudden you said, whoa, this is the feeling is so overwhelming of either supporting you or for the other team that you said, I mean, in Bernabeu, I can only imagine that stadium is an incredible stadium to play in. But what was the stadium that you sort of said, this is a totally different experience?
I've said San Siro is a very special stadium because it's some crazy history been happen, and then it's crazy history work always well for the Milan, because the fans, when they go into the stadium, they always believe that there's a special atmosphere, is a special stadium, and then they have such a belief in the players and in the team. The San Siro is one of the tougher stadium to play. 100% I will put there Anfield. Anfield is a special. I'll say Santiago Bernabeu, Nou Camp, probably Old Trafford, probably Wembley. I had the chance to play in old Wembley before the reconstruction of the.
What's that like to play in front of 110,000 fans? I can't imagine what it's like to be on a field with 110,000 people around you.
No, it's special because in some stadium when you go in, you can even hear your partners because it's so loud, and then it's extra motivation for me. Some player get a little bit. I'm not saying scared. They not feel comfortable, but some players, big players, they need this atmosphere to. Okay, this is my home. It's belong to me.
But that's different from your personality on a day-to-day basis. So your personality is actually quite someone, not necessarily shy, but you don't step into a room and take up the room. You have a more reserved personality, yet you get on the football pitch and you become this lion. Why are there two sides to Andriy?
Because it's opportunity. I can see it's something when I was very young, I was always dreaming to play in front of big stage because back to Ukraine. Ukraine is a big football country, and I grow up watching Dynamo Kiev as is my local team, but very, very big team in international level too. And then I become big fans of Dynamo Kiev on very young age, and then going to the stadium with 80,000 people, and then I was dreaming to have a chance to one day to become professional football players and play in front of all crowd. I think it's we talked about leadership and personality. I know some quiet leaders and some loud leaders. Loud leaders like to talk. Loud leaders love to leading teams with some speeches or some emotional driving speech to the teams, but also is quiet leaders who come and does the work on the pitch. And then it's very important that team recognize these leaders.
And when you were at AC Milan, the team was obviously owned by Silvio Berlusconi. And while you were there, he was also prime minister of the country. What was it like to have the prime minister as the owner of your football team?
It's awesome. But it's be honest with you, Italy, football in Italy is more than religion, you know. And
Just one quick thing, if I can. I was with a friend of mine from Argentina on Sunday watching the game, and I turned to him and I said, "So tell me your feeling of Messi versus Maradona." And he goes, "Oh, fácil." And he goes, "Messi, Dios, and Maradona." And I thought it was so great that he put Maradona above God. It was just a wonderful moment. But anyway, sorry, I jumped in there. But you were saying the Italians take soccer so personally.
Italian is live for the game, for the football game. It's something very special, and to have Berlusconi, of course, is a charismatic leader. He loves football. He did so many great things for the Milan, and then I think the success of the Milan is it's because the Berlusconi was look after the team. You know, it's he really want the best player playing for the AC Milan, and it was not issue for AC Milan to buy the best player in the world. Milan is always to compete with the best teams. He was one of the best team that time, and then I think the Berlusconi did everything that Milan, it was in the top of the world club leading.
In your first year at AC Milan, the then prime minister and owner of the team, Berlusconi, made a bet with you that if you could score 24 goals in the season, that he would send you out on a large yacht. First of all, was it his yacht that he was saying he would send you out on, or was he just going to send you out on a yacht?
No, he was his yacht. He actually is offering him his house to is a Villa Certosa, I think so. Is in Sardinia. It's very beautiful home, and we have a bet with him, and I scored 23 goals.
Right, and I was you think he would have sent you out on a bigger yacht had you gotten 24? Because he sent you out with 23. So I was just wondering if maybe
I scored 23 goals. So I become the golf the score most goal in that season, and he was very generous. He say even if you score 23, the bet was 24, but you can have everything. You know, I mean. I stayed for a week in his villa. I took my teammates, and he's just very generous person. You know, he loves football. He loves athletes. He loves individual, and it make him very special honor.
And in your second year at AC Milan, Real Madrid came knocking on the door and tried to pull you across to Real Madrid. You decided not to go and to stay at AC Milan. But then a number of years later, you were transferred to Chelsea for, at that time, the highest transfer fee ever paid in professional football. I guess first, any regrets on not going to Real Madrid? And then second, on the transfer to Chelsea and what that was like?
I don't have any regrets to not going to Real Madrid, because in that time, uh, I feel like when the offer come to move, I feel I didn't finish my story in AC Milan, and I was attached to the fans, and I feel like I really want to stay there and win the Champions League or make the history of the club. And then, of course, Real Madrid is a special club. It's a history of the uh, football, and at that time, it's big rivalry between Spain and Italy. Still, Real Madrid, Milan, and it's one of the club with everyone dreaming to play. And uh, I I also I was growing up. I saw the Real Madrid, the best teams, but I didn't think too much, because I feel like I want to do the history in AC Milan. And then my move to Chelsea it's one of the period where is uh, I I start to figure it out that I was in the end of my, not in the end of my career, but it was a period where is, oh, I have to make the move or stay. And I decide to move to Chelsea because I want to have different experience. And then, but the history been done. We won the Champions League, we won the league in Italy. Uh, it's something what I left, what I'm very proud about, and my relationship with the fans and with the club is always been great. I just My personal decision was try something different, and yeah, I joined to Chelsea.
Yeah. And in 2004, you win the Ballon d'Or. To those listeners who aren't big soccer fans, that's the MVP trophy for European soccer. It's the best soccer player in the world. That year, Thierry Henry and Ronaldinho, two household names along with yourself, had great seasons and were in the running for it, and you won the Ballon d'Or. When you actually win that, Andriy, how do they? Is there a ceremony, or do they just call you one day and say you won it? How does that work? When we give out things like a MVP for the Super Bowl or a Heisman Trophy, which we give out for college football, they have a big award ceremony. Do they have a award ceremony, or they just call you
Yeah,
up and say you won it?
no, it's a award ceremony in Paris. is a is a special day, uh, and that was very cool. I mean, uh, again, that was my dream come true when I grew up in Ukraine. I had two Ukrainian players who won the Ballon d'Or before they me. That was Igor Bilanov and Oleg Blakhin, both from Ukraine. And then I was third one. And I was very proud. I'm proud for my country. I'm proud for myself, because the boy born in Ukraine come play to AC Milan, and um, uh, I really want to thank you again, my teammates, coaches who was in that time was playing and leading the team. Carlo Ancelotti was coach, and then so many my great teammates. They helped me a lot to, first of all, to believe in myself. I think the AC Milan was my second club, and they really that was a great group of the people, not just great football players. That was a great people, the great human being, very intelligent, all very successful people, great leadership. Anyone could be a great leader in the pitch, and was important leaders like Paolo Maldini, is an example uh, for for many generation. And yeah, for me, it was some significant moment in my career, something what I always dreaming to win, and finally I have a chance. And I think the big success was my game for the AC Milan, my performance for AC Milan, but also for national team. And that year we did a very good run in the group stage to qualify for the World Cup, and we qualified 2006 World Cup. It's the only World Cup with Ukraine been qualified
And
so far.
you went to the quarters. So
Yeah, we went to the quarters. Yeah,
yeah, it was
yeah,
amazing.
we kind of first time we qualified, we did so well, and is a history. But that was a good group of the people, like real fighters. We. Uh, that was a good group. We stuck together, like we have a good game plan, what we have to do, and then I think we the whole country was very proud. It's one of the important moment in history, not only sport history, but something what the people united, Ukrainian people united around big event.
And let's shift for a moment, if we can, back to, well, not back to, but to the Ukraine war against Russia today, and get your thoughts on that. I first of all want to be very clear that you are not engaged as a government official, and yet you're obviously a very, very noteworthy person and have access to both the president and others inside of Ukraine. And your mother still lives in Kiev. Is that correct? I think
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my mother and sister are still there.
Yeah. And I remember listening to a podcast you did right when the conflict broke out. And I think that at that time, it was very clear in your comments that the sense was, here is Russia with such a huge military and sort of such a bigger potential rival, that it was going to either be mass destruction or over quite quickly. And there was a big question about pulling your mother and your sister out, because the thought was that Kiev would get leveled, quite honestly, and that there was going to be mass destruction. And here we are several years later, and the fight is still going on. And the fight is actually going on to a degree that many are not only surprised, but just amazed at the way that Ukraine has been able to respond to the Russian threat. Comment, Andriy, on sort of, as you look at what's happened up until now, what's been the key to that success? Has it been the technology? Has it been the leadership? Or has it been sort of the heart and soul of the Ukrainian people, or a combination of all?
I think a mostly combination of all. I think first of all that the Ukrainian people is incredible, and you're absolutely right, because we're not only showing the resilience like in the beginning. We keep showing the world we can fight, but also we're showing some significant progress in every aspect. First of all, we developed some technology, drone technology, that we can defend almost ourselves from any drones attack, a Russian drones attack. Of course, we show all leaders in the world that we capable to defend ourselves. We're capable not only defend, we're capable to progress in any new innovation in the war. We're capable to resisting, but not only resisting. Now we start to showing that we could not only defense, we can progress. And obviously that leadership of Zelensky is very important. Yeah, he's showing.
What's he like as a person? You obviously know him quite well. What's he like?
Look, he's I think it's a good leadership. It's showing that in the beginning people didn't take him serious, but during this war he showed that he capable to handle incredible pressure, and then I think he make some right decision, and especially in a crucial moment, he capable to bring the right people on the board, and then trust them. They can really shape this war in a different direction, and then obviously the main plans is stop the war right now and sit in the table and have a negotiation. This is what in the last couple of years every leader in the world try to reach this agreement between two countries. But in the point, the country have to live during the war, and then Ukrainian people showing incredible resilience, but also showing that we can not only we can survive, but we can capable to have economy inside, what also help and feed our people and army. We capable to during the sport events, during all this time, our athlete perform, our football teams. What regarding my work, we're also doing all the competition inside of the country. We're capable to send our young generation to compete, and with such a difficult condition. And all this, they really bring this situation, bring Ukrainian people together.
Yeah.
And I don't know for how long this war is gonna be, but I'm sure that all the times I think they will show the resilience, and we show there's some different aspect of our talented people to bring something interesting and different in the moment when we need.
It's amazing. My understanding is that you all are launching about 10,000 drones a day, which is and you're making 8 million a year. And I guess the right now the real focus seems to be on Crimea, and that the attack that Ukraine is putting on Crimea right now to knock out both the electric grid as well as the gas supply. If for whatever reason Ukraine was able to take and dislodge Crimea, because Crimea was the first move by Putin to expand back towards the former Soviet Union, a turn of that would be very, very symbolic to this conflict of sort of turning the tide back towards Ukraine and potentially getting Russia to the table. Is my read on that, Andriy, correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, because we need to show the Russian that we can not only defense, we could do some mission that, and then the final touch is everything, like you said, it should be bring the Russia to the table to sit and talk about, because is a final mission to every war finish with the peace talk, and then quicker as possible that happen. It have to be a right condition for Ukraine to sit in the table and talk. And also, I think that it's very important that all the leaders in the world, they understand that Ukraine deserves that. That
And-
we have to be in the right condition to sit in the table.
Yeah, and I would also add the President Trump allowing for the the building of Patriot missiles in Ukraine, there are only two other countries in the world that have that, what I would call a licensing agreement for the
Yeah.
technology, and that's Japan and Germany. And so giving Ukraine the ability to build Patriot missile systems is a big move that President Trump did last week. My understanding is it's going to take probably about 2 years to get that manufacturing capability up and going in Ukraine. But if Ukraine can get going towards that, and obviously you now have the right to do it, that could be a real game changer
Yeah.
in your defense.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, I don't know for how long that takes to build all this factory, everything. But I think the more important fact that President Trump start to trust Ukrainian people, is start to believe that, and it's a very positive move for us that the America start to trust the Ukraine. And then because this kind of the technology, if you share with someone, you have to really trust about, because is very unique technology about the Patriot system. Is only Patriot system can shoot down the ballistic rockets.
Yeah. Talk for a moment, Andriy, about both the World Cup seemed to be saying that they were thinking about letting Russia play in the next World Cup, which was a topic that you jumped on immediately and went and met with the head of FIFA and put down your foot and said, hold it, you can't do that. But then the International Olympic Committee just ruled to basically allow Russia to come and participate in the 2028 Olympics. How important is the messaging of allowing Russia to come to the 2028 Olympics or play in the 2030 World Cup as it relates to them being the aggressor against Ukraine, and these international sports leagues saying, well, we're not going to think about the geopolitical impact of it. We're just going to let them play sports.
I absolutely agree with you. I think it's the wrong decision from Olympic Committee, but they make this decision, and I think the decision is every federation, because it's so many different federation. They could decide what they should do, probably, and then I'm sure that football is not ready for integrate Russia. And then I'm sure the sport is not ready, because Russia use the sport to legalize this action. We know this sport, we don't like to speak about political side, but in the end, sport is the big influence in the relationship of the people. If you let a country who invited not just Ukraine, that some country, and then this war is black and white. It's very understandable that action what Russia did against Ukraine, and then they try to use a whole history to make the little bit joke with the card to make, but this war is very clear, black and white. And then my opinion is their own decision. We should put the pressure on Russian government and to sit in the table and bring the peace to the world. And after that, we can talk about reintegration of Russia. But is the next step. And then obviously I'm going to World Cup, and then I'm sure we're gonna have a conversation about this too. And I have all my cards to explain that is not the time to reintegrate the Russia back to football.
Are you going to the finals on Sunday in New York?
Yeah. I can miss. I know is one of the for me that one of the best teams already in the final, and we're gonna wait a game for tomorrow, and who gonna be second one. England or Argentina.
So who do you think wins tomorrow? Argentina, England? And then whichever one of those you think's going to win, what happens on Sunday against Spain?
It's quite. It's. I don't. I can speak about that. It's both game gonna be very close. I think.
Yeah.
I think England very strong, and Tuchel is a very good coach. He brought the squad. He left some very good talent out from the team, but he defends his selection. He defends his choice very well. He said he's going not for the talent. He's going for the team. He's going for the solid group of the players who is ready to make this working for the result. And then I think the England been very pragmatic team. Maybe it's not the best playing football team, but they get their right result. And then game against Norway, they defend very well. They, especially in the last 20 minutes, they come out with some right substitution. They bring some energy inside of the pitch. They close very well center and sides. Then is not allowed to Norway to crossing that easy like normally. They could create the chances for the goal. In Argentina, we talk about best player in the whole time. Leo Messi is something like I never see Pelé playing, but I saw Maradona, and Leo Messi is a free idols. Absolutely, God is something what make him incredibly special player.
That's so interesting and neat. I was looking at the value of the rosters between the highest is France at 1.7 billion, and number 2 is England at I think about 1.6 billion, and then Spain at 1.4 billion, and then Argentina at 800 million as it relates to the contract value of the players on the field. So it would be interesting if if it ends up being Argentina against Spain, that you've got the two less valuable rosters playing against one another. But I think either way, either England, Spain, or Spain, Argentina is going to really be one of the great. I mean, it's going to be un clásico. It's going to be really an incredible game, I would think.
Yeah, of course. But don't forget about, because Leo Messi, his value of market value, it's different now because his age. If it's take 10 years ago, his market value could be, what do you think, 1 billion probably?
Easy.
Yeah,
Easy.
yeah,
Easy. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's quite something. And I will say, one of the other things that I thought was interesting when I was trying to describe your career to an American audience, I sat there and said, okay, well, who would he be comparable to? And one of the American football players who you're somewhat comparable to in your achievements is someone named Troy Aikman, who was the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. He won 3 Super Bowls. You went to 2 Champions League finals and won 1. And then he won the MVP once, and you won the MVP once as well. So I'm sitting there. And one of the things that I think people forget is that the Super Bowl last year was watched on a global basis by 150 million people on Sunday, which in the United States, everybody stops everything and we watch television, and then a global audience comes on and watches it. But 150 million. We're going to get somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 billion people watching the final on Sunday in New York. I mean, it is 10x the number of people who will watch the Super Bowl, which I just thought was a fascinating number. So while your career sits there with someone like a Troy Aikman, your global brand as it relates to the people who watched you play and know who you are is just orders of magnitude that's very hard for people in the United States to sort of get their head around.
Yeah, but let's go to the point, because the World Cup is really accelerate this integration of the young generation to the soccer, to the football. It's only, it have to be well run programs started from the coaches, because you have to bring the best coaches from the world and integrate inside of the US program. Coaches make very big difference, and not only to the professional teams or MLS team. You have to be in early stage, because coaches with the good program, with good methodology of the work, can really change everything in the next 10 years. And then I'm sure the football could be potentially on the top, like basketball, American football, baseball, ice hockey. Yeah, it could
There you
be.
go. Ice hockey. And I mean, the other thing is what happened to F1 in the United States when they did the Drive to Survive series and sort of put a face to the sport. And I think that having someone like Messi playing in the United States, albeit he's Argentine, I think the American fans, and particularly obviously the Miami fans, all really feel like he is part of this league. And so as a result of it, to have the best player in the world playing here in the MLS rather than in the Premiership, rather than the Bundesliga, what have you, is a huge catalyst to exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you, but you already have that in the World Cup. You can multiply it again, but after that, you have to be right structure to come. If you wanna make this league the really big one, and we talk about numbers. America love the numbers. America love the good fans, good solid sport. With the football have a big chance, soccer to come very important sport in America. And I wish it could happen in the next 10, 20 years.
Well, if it does, you and I will watch it happen.
Yeah.
Andriy, I can't thank you enough. And it's just been a real joy. It's an honor to meet you and talk to you about your career. I hope that at some point, Colin, you and I can maybe go hit a golf ball together, which would be a real joy. Have a great time at the game on Sunday. And just let me, if it's if it is Spain, Argentina, who are you rooting for?
Look, it's quite difficult. I know, I think
if I ask you Spain, England, can you give me which one you'd be rooting for, or no?
No, you know what? I think it could happen. Probably Spain, England.
Yeah,
it could happen Spain, England, because I like the spirit of the England right now. Of course, when you're playing against God, you never know what can happen.
There you go. That's to anyone who doesn't know what he's talking about. That's Maradona's hand of God goal in 1986 in City when Argentina beat England.
You know what? That World Cup was I watching. I was 10 years old, and then I absolutely get loving with Maradona. I mean, obviously not for the hand goal, but in a way that second goal
the second goal.
He scored against. Yeah,
one of the most unbelievable goals ever.
Yeah, it's something that I could never forget in my life, and then it's great memory for.
Very much.
And then again, you never know what could happen. This is beauty of the football, because any chances, any moment, game can switch in different way.
Very much so. Andriy, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining.
For me, Will.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.